Okay, we should probably get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike McNamara. I'm the Mutual of Enumclaw Professor, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 30th Annual Walton Lecture. This lecture series has brought to our campus prominent leaders in the field of risk management and insurance, and with today's lecture, we're continuing with that fine tradition. The Walton Lecture is made possible through a generous endowment from the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of Washington. The endowment honors one of their past presidents, Mr. Max Walton, who was an independent insurance agent in Richland, Washington. The Walton Lecture is the first of two events this week that we have for our students. Tomorrow at 5 p.m., we'll have our Insurance Industry Night program in Todd 125. Representatives from PIMCO, Safeco, Aon, Travelers, and some other companies will discuss careers in risk management and insurance and offer some career advice to our students. There's a reception following at the Carson Center. And as with today's lecture, the two events tomorrow have been approved for amplifier credits through our new curriculum in the College of Business. And now to today's lecture. The Port of Seattle is a special purpose government entity that was created in 1911. The port includes such things as SeaTac Airport, the ocean cargo ports, the cruise ship terminals, parks, port fire and police, and other operations. The port is indispensable to Washington's economy when you consider the imports and exports that enter through these various terminals. The port has over 1,900 employees, it generates over 216,000 jobs, and it also generates substantial tax revenue for state and local government. Fortunately, the port has some wonderful leaders, and we're fortunate to have two of them with us tonight. Dave Soike, a WSU civil engineering alum, joined the port in 1980. After being promoted numerous times, he was named the Chief Operating Officer of the port in 2016. Jeff Hollingsworth brought an engineering background to the port when he joined the port in 2001. He worked previously as a loss prevention engineer with Boeing and also worked with Factory Mutual. He leads the port's risk management department, and he's also a Coug dad. Both men continued their education, earning an MBA at the University of Washington's Business College. Their lecture is titled Planes, Ships, Cyber, and Internships, Managing Business Risk at the Port of Seattle. After the presentation, we should have some time for questions and answers. We have microphones set up, so students, be thinking of something that you'd like to ask our speakers tonight during their presentation. And then after the question and answer period, we'll have a special presentation for tonight's speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm Washington State welcome to the 2022 Walton Lecturers, Dave Soike and Jeff Hollingsworth. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. Hey, good evening. Can everybody hear me? Terrific. Hey, I'm pumped to be here tonight. One reason is I'm a Coug. And I haven't been on campus since I brought my youngest son here a little over a decade ago, and it continues to evolve and get more beautiful. I'm very proud of my employer, which is the Port of Seattle, and it is a public agency that does a lot of good for the community. And I hope to share that with you tonight, mostly through photos. So I'll kick it off, and I might go 5 or 10 minutes and kind of give you a broad picture. Then we'll go into the business side in terms of risk. And then we'll finish up with a little bit more. But let me give you a tantalizing note about the end. Your future is really bright. It is now an employee strength versus a corporate strength. The opportunities you're going to see in your next 40 years are going to be fantastic. One reason is the baby boomers are timing out, and I was born just at the very center of that boom. So that very large population has really occupied leadership in businesses. And our firm, we're growing and we're hiring. So I'd like to talk to you about that right at the end. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the Port of Seattle. This gives you a sense for the photographs of what we do. We operate gateways, airport gateways, maritime gateways. Those are the largest ships afloat and the largest cranes in Washington State and all the way down to California. We are building for the future. We are one of the 4th largest maritime load centers in the U.S. If you think about the airport, we're the 10th or 9th largest, depending how you measure it, in the entire country. Way up here in this northwest corner of the country, and we're booming. I'll show you some reasons why. The North Pacific fishing fleet that goes up to Alaska every year centers in Seattle, and a major amount of jobs and economic activity is the winter provisioning for that fleet. We also, we've got some beauty, and we've got a lot of containers sitting around. And then that picture right there with a woman with a red top, that is the interior of one of our new facilities, the North Satellite, and that is artwork. We have a $15 million art collection that we have spread throughout all of our public facilities so the public can enjoy it. And again, a huge fishing fleet. Gives you a sense for what we do. We're public. My leaders, one boss above me, are 5 people elected at large from the public. My boss is the exec director. He reports to the Public Commission and the voters of King County. King County is actually one of the largest geographic counties in the country and one of the most highly populated in the country, too. Ports, what are ports? You know, right here in Whitman County, there's a port, and what they push is maritime commerce up and down the rivers to get to the coast, to get to these large ports so that you can spend exports going out. That creates jobs here. We actually are the port for Eastern Washington, parts of Eastern Oregon, and parts of British Columbia. Our catchment basin goes that far. Some landlocked port authorities do things like, I want to get connectivity to every home in our community so the kids have a greater opportunity for advancement and better learning. We joined with the Port of Tacoma because when I first started, we competed with another public entity. We would put up vast sums of money to attract shippers to come to our port. They would do the same. We both marketed in Asia heavily. We both marketed in Europe. And we would build competing facilities. One would be vacant, one would get full. And then we'd have to go market more to fill things up. So we partnered with them. This is us on the left, Port of Seattle. We're the orange. Port of Tacoma, which is only 30 miles away in terms of water traffic. We created that entity in the middle, which is the Northwest Seaport Alliance. This was groundbreaking across the U.S. Now it has happened in the southern coast on the East Coast. What we did is we quit competing and we said, this joint venture, our new child together, it'll be some of employees from the Port of Seattle and some from the Port of Tacoma. We would like you to put the cargo where it makes most economic sense. We don't care which harbor. We're both going to invest equal amounts of property and assets, and we're both going to share profits 50-50. And that created a boon for us to recapture a lot of marine cargo. To give you a sense that this is the kind of the businesses we do, you get a picture and a little bit of the businesses underneath. First Marine, SeaTac Airport, commercial fishing and moorage, real estate for us. We're one of the largest landholders in King County, and I'll show you a map that shows some of that. So we lease to many, many restaurants. We lease to many warehousing opportunities. We lease to large businesses. Unlike a general purpose government, we actually deal with private businesses most of the time. We don't do your water bill. We don't do your electric bill. We are an interface with businesses to try to create economic activity and more jobs in the community. And in the meantime, we're cleaning it up heavily. We were greatly affected by COVID, as was everyone else, but you can tell by these curves, both at the airport and both in the cruise business, we're mightily rebounding now. We are a small company in a way. Depending how you measure the Port of Seattle, we're about $750 million company to $1 billion company. And we only have 2,200, we're growing to 2,500, something I'd like to mention in the end, but we have a global reach. Our business customers go all the way into Asia, our business customers go all the way into South America, all the way into Europe, and into the Middle East. Both air travelers and shipping containers go across to Europe and the Middle East through the Panama Canal. These are some of the things we're doing. We care about the environment, and we had a public official probably about 15 years ago started talking about, why don't we do something for the environment? And it was many others were, what are you talking about? She broke new ground. She was the first female commissioner, and she was the first one to voice the environment. Since then, we at our airport, in partnership with Alaska Airlines, we have put biofuels in jets up to 10 to 15%, and we were the first ones to test those flights out of the harbor. We're trying to create a plant that will create biofuels for jet aircraft from wood waste and garbage waste in our entire King County area. We think there's enough catchment there that we can do it. We're trying to convince large energy companies and the huge airlines to partner into it. There's a couple already operating in the U.S. Municipal solid waste. We, as a large landowner, we are actually purchasing green credits by cleaning up municipal solid waste, and that helps us offset some of the carbon emissions, not from us, but from our clients and our businesses. Hydrogen studies. We're looking at hydrogen and wind very heavily for ships and aircraft. And waterfront electrification. A lot of ships come into harbors, and if you look at the smokestacks, they're burning dirty diesel in the middle of the ocean. We've stopped that in our waterways. It's all clean diesel, but we want the stacks to end. We don't want any more carbon put out. So we're electrifying all of the berths. And we're making great progress in the cruise industry, and we've got some container ships plugged in now. The container ships will be harder because they're owned by farther away foreign countries, and the regulations are less. This is the People's Park on the Duwamish River. We live on Native American lands. We operate on Native American lands. We're recognizing everything they do for us. This is a portion of the estuary that we have planted. You see red there, and those are all new plants and a new fishing pier and community dock. And this is an industrial area that needed environmental justice because they had been polluted on by many of our businesses for many, many years. So we are the biggest biggest entity in the region that is cleaning up the shorelines and planting new opportunities for baby salmon to feed so that they can make it out to the ocean. There's only about 10% of that underwater habitat left, and we're growing it. On the right, we grow kelp and oysters, trying to see what we can do because kelp is the underwater forest that enables all the other sea life to flourish. Jobs, social. Port Gen, we're trying to create jobs everywhere we can. The greatest unemployment area is in youth, 16 to 28. We're doing everything we can. We're bringing in military veterans who are leaving the military and acclimating them to private business opportunities. And they're great, frankly. Most of them have been terrific. We have community advisory tables. We operate an airport around about 6 communities. We meet with them every month. What is it you need? What can we do to help your economy? How can we help you clean up? It has changed from a adversarial relationship to positive. We're working together. And apprenticeships. We're pulling people in from community colleges. We've actually started 2 high schools, one aviation high school, one maritime high school, trying to get career paths that come into our economy. And why do we want that? We want to sustain the port for another 110 years, and we want people to have living wage jobs so they can afford to live in Seattle. And almost all of the jobs we provide are those. We built some really cool things. At the airport, for Alaska Airlines, we built them a brand new concourse, tore down the old one in phases and put up this one. It's the North Satellite. It has about 20 aircraft gates around it, and it is dramatically taller, brighter, daylight, more daylight, not low ceilings anymore, and a lot of art. Another thing we did is we built a new international arrivals facility. Our arrivals facility was 50 years old. People were waiting in planes on the tarmac for 30 minutes. Then they'd get into the gate. They couldn't get off the airplane yet because it was so full, 50-year-old small facility. And then they'd have to wait in lines. We built this facility. You can see the first aircraft being welcomed to the facility, and that's an overhead bridge, one of 2 in the U.S. like that. And that facility on the right, it doesn't look it, but all the square footage in that new facility, 6 football fields in size. Terminal 5, we're investing heavily on the waterfront too. We have the largest cranes. We've got 4 more coming. We've got it half operating now, and we've got 1 berth in operation. There'll be 2, and you can see the picture on the right. So when you come to the port, you get to work on so many things. And the opportunity, there's internal internships. If you're done trying this business item, you could go to this different business and take an internship there and see if you like it. We keep training our employees because we want to keep them as long as we can. And if we lose you, it's a win for us and a win for you. We've trained you, we've gotten good work out of you, and then we start again. The blue is how much we invest in building custom facilities for our customers. The green, we're going to double it. The amount of opportunity in this program, probably 25% of our employee base is involved in building really cool projects. There's a lot coming. This is a picture of the land we own, and it demonstrates that, I'll just go to area jobs. For us having 2,200 to 2,500 employees soon, we're helping to generate 121,000 jobs. That is probably the greatest economic benefit we can provide in addition to taxes for the municipalities and everything necessary. Jeff, over to you.
Thank you, Dave. Risk management. I always start with kind of asking, well, how do we define risk management? It can mean a lot of different things, whether you're talking about yourself, your family, your own personal situation, or where you work, or if you're in a risk management department. And what I've found interesting about this profession is that there's no bounds to it, and there's a lot of creativity in it. And the real key is knowing what the organization that you're working for, what their goals are, what they envision for the future, and then kind of matching their step and organizing your risk management program that supports that. Broadly speaking, at the Port of Seattle, risk management, we support port operations by analyzing risks and their impacts on employees, facilities, assets, and operations. As Dave has kind of shown you, we have a lot of land, a lot of property, a lot of employees, a lot of visitors, a lot of construction activity, a lot of contractors and vendors on our site, and a lot of guests that come through and use our facilities. And our goal is for everyone that comes through and we do business with, or that we interface with, it gets done in a safe way. They have good experience, but if there are problems and there are things that happen, which they do, that we work as best we can to remedy it, and make if we can make the situation whole, make everybody come out a winner. Now, it can't always be done, but we strive to do that. This is the intent with this presentation too, is that there's some material here that's in the appendix that might be useful for people that are looking at risk management. There's some references and links in there that we're going to make available, at least through the professor, and it can be distributed. So realizing that you can't read some of this on here, one of the ways we communicate internally is through an intranet. We call it the Compass page, which is kind of a portal which allows us to take intake issues and things that we need to deal with. And the risk management department is pretty small. It's myself that I oversee it. Then I have an administrator, and then we have 4 specialists that work in different areas. One of them is, we have a claims manager and then an assistant to that. And what they work on claims, we retain a lot of our risks. It helps us reduce our cost of our insurance and allows us to take control, especially on recoveries and subrogation collection when we have property damage that was done by somebody we can identify, that we can work with them to get our recovery to make us whole. We also have a risk analyst who kind of is, can work both on the claim side, but also kind of work on the analyst side, which is kind of the forward or the strategic part, upcoming projects, what's the construction, what are we looking at, if we do this operation, what are the impacts and things that we need to think about. And then we have one individual who's in charge of what I call our fleet driver safety program. And it's kind of dear to my heart, as when I started at the port 21 years ago, right before 9/11, I realized that we didn't have a fleet program. And Dave mentioned we have about 2,200 employees going up to 2,500. We have about 800 owned pieces of fleet, or that would be vehicles, trailers that can be driven on public roadway. And that's quite a bit if you consider the ratio of employees to actual fleet. And we have actually 2 fleet shops. We do a lot of our own work and maintenance on those, which not a lot of organizations do. As a matter of fact, we do a lot of things kind of, I would say, old school way, vertical integration, meaning that, for example, on our conveyance systems. And you didn't mention conveyance, Dave, but we have a baggage optimization project. It's kind of like working on I-5. It never ends. It's always something coming on. And we've got a 5-year, I think it's over $1.5 billion program just on our conveyance system, which includes the intake of bags as you come to the airport, go through, you check them, working with our TSA counterparts, going through screening, getting out to the tugs that take them out to the actual aircraft. It's a big operation. And most airports, I mean, I can't even think of another one in the United States that actually manages that, including all the maintenance, all the work, all the upgrades, and we do all that internally. Now, when we do on this big project, it is done by a contractor because we can't do that ourselves. But just like our police department, they're our own employees. Fire department, they're our own employees. And we do a lot of this stuff internally, which can be looked at, well, it's extra cost, isn't it cheaper to contract it out? But there's a lot of benefit for people that, for doing that internally, because for one thing, the pride of ownership, the pride that people take in doing their work, a lot of people have that. And even though we have a lot of collective bargaining units, which is a risk and a challenge. I think we have 22 different agreements that cover these different trades that we have. We have a labor relations groups that handles that. But we really work together to work through issues, whether it's a labor issue, and ensuring that keeping the workforce happy results in a lot more production. So our department is very small, but we feel that we have a very broad reach out. And I had to throw this slide in there when we were doing my presentation. Dave goes, Jeff, the Compass demographic shows that the port has 2,227 employees. Imagine your department of a handful of people serving that large a population across so many risks. Amazing. Well, that's right, Dave. We need more people, so we're looking to hire. Is that right? So if anybody has any interest in risk management, we're always looking for interested candidates. And you know, the field of risk management, there's a lot of different parts and segments. And I myself, I went to Montana State, Bobcat, got my engineering degree there. Ended up working for Factory Mutual, which is a large insurer of property, and that turned out to a job with Boeing, working in their compliance and fire protection engineering, which then ultimately led to the port. And meeting a lot of people and a lot of backgrounds along the way. There's people on my staff that have gotten degrees in economics or just business, that have worked in claims, and they've kind of, they're good claim specialists, but they want to learn more in other areas. Or people that have come up, like the guy who heads up the driver safety program. He kind of came from Alaska, working with fleet. He's got a lot of good ideas on how we can control incident and accidents. And so probably the number one thing that would stand out if I have to look back in terms of what's been a success is we limited all the primary insurance, and we have busing operations, we have a lot of fleet, we have a lot of people in and out on maintenance on the roads, and we took all that in-house, and we're probably saving about $1.5 million a year in premium just on fleet alone, and that's after you cut out all the losses and operating expense that goes with managing that. So that's kind of an under-recognized achievement there, Dave. But we do other things. So we kind of consider ourselves in our department a hub of other services. Like I said, claims management. We have foreign travel, so when individuals, our commissioners, or Dave, you take those swanky trips to Europe and wherever you're going with your family. We do cover foreign travel, which the biggest, well, you think about it, we have kind of extortion, ransom for executives. That's part of that. We also have, if somebody gets sick or injured or has an incident that we need to transport them back to the United States, we have that. There's some real good benefits in that. We do all the notary. We work with people to get their notary stamps and keep those current. We do the bonds that we have to do for, like within the state of Washington, workers' compensation. It's monopolistic. You either have to get your workers' comp through the state, or you have to become qualified to self-adjudicate and manage your own claims, which we do. And when people get put on, they have either short-term disability, long-term, and we have to do pension bonds. We do all those. We do with the contracting insurance information, as you can tell, we do a lot of work, and that figure kind of scares me, Dave, of the millions of capital investment coming up. It means we're going to have a lot of contracts, a lot of third-party vendors on site, and ensuring that their contract documents, the indemnification, the insurance, coverages, the limits, the proper endorsements are all in place is really important. And we've had some big lawsuits and claims on different operations, but we've got really tight agreements. We've got strong indemnification clauses, which essentially means that if you're coming on and doing work on our property, either you're going to be wholly responsible, or we will do up to the point that you're up to the extent that you have negligence. And then we make sure that we have the right commercial general liability with all the additional insured endorsements. And I can't tell you how many times that additional insured endorsement has basically paid for all our defense and saved our limits and made our insurance secondary. And so we really work with legal and construction staff on all these big contracts. And one of the things, some cities and some public agencies, like the state of Washington and their risk management program, City of Seattle, is focused around somebody who has a law degree that's working on claims and litigation. And where we work, we have attorneys that kind of go through all the initial tort claims. A tort claim is something that has to be filed under state statute before they can actually file a lawsuit against the port or any public agency. And we really have a great working relationship with our attorneys. Sometimes you hear these stories, legal attorney, well, they're not going to talk to the risk management because they're not a legal attorney. We have great relationships with all our attorneys, including the labor relations, which really helps us. We kind of, we don't try to do the legal work, and they don't try to do the risk management work. And that's one thing I think that, any company, there's got to be a good, strong connection between your legal side and your risk management side. As a department, I'm going to be kind of talking a little bit about what we do within the department and what we do from a department standpoint, and then also kind of what we handle as things happen. And I like to think of our department as there's mandatory things that we do every year that we know we're going to do that are predictable. Like we know we're going to get a certain volume of claims. We know we're going to settle a certain amount of settlements. We know we're going to collect roughly a certain amount of recovery, and we know roughly with the manpower that's going to take to do that. We know that certain groups are going to need our support. So that's kind of what I would call the day-to-day stuff that we have to account for. And then there's the strategic part, the stuff that we don't know is going to happen. I mean, you can come to work any day and, you can all of a sudden have a new interlocal agreement that came up or something that happened that requires immediate attention. So we have to be flexible to be able to work with that. But we do have metrics and charts for things that we do. This is one chart that kind of shows the growth and compares our premium as our portfolio of assets has grown on the property side. So right now we have about $7.6 billion of insurable value that we had on our latest renewal, which was in July for property insurance, and that's a lot of assets. And but as you can see, the green is the value of the insurable value. So in 2010, we had about just slightly over $4 billion. You got to add 1,000 to that side, and there, I mean, we're over the $6 billion mark. That was, I believe, that has not been updated for this year, I don't think. But as you can see, the premium has fairly stayed pretty stable. I mean, it's gone up, down, up, but certainly our values have grown much higher than the cost of insurance. And we've controlled that through taking higher retentions, cutting out certain coverages, actually splitting our coverage between the aviation side and non-aviation side, and working with our broker to really identify the markets that can work best with the port. And the goal for next year is to, on the non-aviation side, is look at some new markets, because as we find that a lot of insurers are taking the word port and not really underwriting to our activity, but underwriting to the name. And as Dave pointed out, we have a lot of retail space. We have parking. Well, in between the parking garage at the airport and then Elliott Bay, I think those are pretty much the two largest parking garages in King County, if not the state, in total volume of cars. And we have other aspects of our business that don't, fall into what underwriting may call port. So our goal is to really come up with an interactive type presentation, and that can be shown, that can really show what we're doing, and work on getting our rate down. And this is the type of stuff that there's a lot of work that goes in putting together, but it's a quick snapshot to kind of show how effective we're doing. And we've always kind of looked at insurance as something that goes hand in hand with retaining risk and knowing where we think the best value is in terms of investing. And we've gotten good support from the executive leadership staff. This is kind of one of the documents that we prepare. It shows some transparency. Again, within our organization, shows kind of, this is just a quick snapshot, shows our kind of excess airport owners liability coverage, our hauling machinery for some vessels. We've got 2 police boats, a surveying boat, some other vessels that we place coverage for. And we prepare these, our risk analyst does that. And we make that available and transparent for people to see. Then every year there's a commission. I do an update twice a year. And Dave, your name is there right under Steve Metrics. I'm sure you read this document, right? We try to be transparent and get information out there. Now, as Dave mentioned, so the taxpayers are the ones that elect the commission, and the commission is the one who hires the CEO, and then everything gets delegated through delegation of authority. And we have authority to do certain things up to dollar value. So, but as part of that delegation, we report up about what we're doing, where we spent money, and is it within the budget? And if it's not, where do we see problem areas? And that's what this document explains. It is, like I said, this is not intended that you could read, but it's, kind of a, it's one of those internal things that we have to do within our department, and you'll be able to read it in the handout. And then on our liability premium, we measure that in terms of per $1,000 of operating revenue, and that's been fairly consistent in terms of it's been between 1.4 and 1.6. It did go down. You can see it went down during the pandemic, start of the pandemic. Revenues kind of went back up, but that's kind of one of the targets we look for. And we've added coverages over the years as there's insurance on the liability side have come forward, like cyber insurance. We weren't one of the first companies to jump into cyber insurance, but after about 5 years and really talking with our IT team, we decided that it would be a good thing, to show that we've done our due diligence and that we haven't ignored it. And we don't get a ton of coverage, but it does cover us for a data breach. In Washington, there's statutory requirements on what you need to do, or what happens if there is a release of privately protected information, and having not just the insurance, but the resources from forensics and legal available for us in the event that we have to write letters and make sure that we're in compliance if there is a data breach. We found that to be very useful. And there's also an extortion and ransom coverage. If you follow this type of stuff, hasn't been unheard of for people that infiltrate your system and basically put some type of a lock on it and extort or want a certain amount of ransom, or they'll threaten that they're not going to let you operate your system. And if you're it's interesting on the way that's underwritten, because they underwrite this very carefully. So if they feel that you have any weaknesses, they're probably not going to offer you coverage. And then if you're well covered, you're probably not going to you might not be the first target for a loss. You're kind of so we don't buy a lot of this. We bought about $10 million worth of this coverage, but we reduced it down to $5 million due to a price hike. So we kind of look at what we want to spend. We look at where we can increase our limits and our retentions to keep the price stable. The other area that's been challenging is public officials, directors, and officers coverage, which covers basically wrongful acts of your organization. And that would include all employees. Dave, if you mess up, we've got coverage for you. And those are the lawsuits that usually end up being quite big. And if there's one thing I've learned as a risk manager, I came up from the property side, know a lot about property and that type of thing. A little bit less so on the liability, but complaints among the workforce, if they're not addressed, can really quickly turn sour, and you find yourself being sued by a current or former employee. And that can be quite costly, especially if you've done something from the organization side that you look back on and say, gee, I wish we wouldn't have done that. Failure to promote, harassment, discrimination during hiring. I mean, almost every aspect as an organization these days, you really got to make sure that you're treating everybody fairly, as it should be, fairly from the time you go through hiring through their employment and then when they leave. And our biggest lawsuits in the past 10 years have all been in the employment practices areas. And we do have training on it, and it's one of those things that as a manager, it can quickly escalate if you don't have a resource. And one of the things the Port did that has really helped is we developed a workplace responsibility program. Now, it was not a risk management program, but we worked very closely with HR. And on the claims and insurance side, I mean, you have to notify your insurer when you are aware of an incident that may give rise to a future claim. And it can be tough to do because these policies are written on a claims-made basis. So you have to give notice but when this incident occurs, and with a large organization, I mean, there's the clause that you sign off on, have you reported every known incident that happened in the past year that may give rise to a future claim? Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know everything that happens. Dave doesn't know. So that's one of those clauses we've worked with our insurers to kind of reduce it, narrow it. Basically, if the risk management department has been made aware of general counsel, we will report. We can assure you that we've reported everything that we know about. But this is an area, especially with police and other labor, that you really have to stay on top of. And when it's identified, a lot of times, so with this workplace responsibility, it's an opportunity for an employee, if they feel like they're not being treated fairly or something has happened, whether it's with a coworker or manager, they can report that through a hotline to a third party, meaning they don't have to go to their boss, and then it gets investigated, and the manager against, let's say the complaint was made against an employee, gets investigated, looked at, and determined if there's a finding being made. And that has been good, because when we find out that happens, we have to evaluate how certain are we that of this incident. Like, was there actually written, did the employee threaten something, or terminated employee threaten a lawsuit or demand something? Because your policy is going to require that, if it's, especially written demand or request, you got to let the insurer know. And it's also tricky if you switch insurers during renewal, and you've got lingering things that either haven't been reported or are going to be reported, but you don't have enough to report it, and you're switching insurers. So the employment practices workforce is probably, it's always a hot topic, but that's one thing that can really bite you if you're not prepared for it. And we'll skip over this one. We get into emerging risks. I call it emerging risks. And this would include, it can include things that people have talked about, or things that, at one point cyber was a kind of an emerging risk, in which the sense that organizations didn't necessarily know, or, other than Y2K, what might happen in the future. But climate change is another one. I've had discussions with folks on, climate change and the rising of the sea waters, and how does that impact our docks and our piers, and long-term effects of that. And like Swiss Re, a reinsurer that is a very strong company, they have a lot of interesting scientists, engineers on their staff, and it's a great resource for finding what's latest in research, what they've been doing, and what they see. Swiss Re, really good stuff there. And a lot, mega data. Pollution at one point, was kind of a little bit of an unknown. Back in the 80s, the insurance decided we've had enough of these pollution claims, and they dropped that from coverage, which gave rise to new coverage, specific specialized coverage for pollution. And Dave, you showed some of that, the sites that we've had cleanup on. The Duwamish is a big. The Duwamish comes basically, the Green River comes down from. They've got the White River merging, and you got Howard Hansen Dam, and then it kind of goes down, flows into the Green River, which then turns into the Duwamish, which is the man-made portion, and then dumps into Elliott Bay. And along that whole stretch, you've had companies like Boeing and Packard and other big manufacturers since the early turn of the century that were dumping stuff in there. Major Superfund site. So us, and along with several others, we've been working on that cleanup for years. And in terms of pollution and environmental, there's fixed fund type insurance coverage for sites where there's a known and contaminated hazard. But what's more tricky is if you don't know the extent where this is. Any underground contamination if you're building. And that sometimes comes to business a few times. We start, and all of a sudden you realize there's more hazardous material there that has to be removed, time out. You got to remove that stuff. And then you also have the, the whole, it falls more into construction defect type issues, in which you have water intrusion during building of apartments, multi-family housing, in which there's water, which then turns into mold, and that can result in actually new projects completely being torn down and having to be rebuilt. And if you've had completed completed operations coverage, in which you get damage for property within a certain time frame after you completed construction, it's hit insurers in a bad way. So that's another area. And then even the application, we do a lot of landscape maintenance, and we try to do everything organically, which is another unique thing. We have large park areas that we don't use any types of pesticides or chemicals. It's all organic, and those guys do a great job. But there are some certain things where we've had to use chemicals to treat things, and you asked me for unique things in risk management, like we had a proposal to use goats to clear out a bunch of vegetation. And what I thought about that one, I had to learn a lot about goats and what goats and goat handlers can do in Washington. And I knew there'd be some type of licensing and regulation, and there are certain things that you have to comply with. For example, you can't, and if you're going to bring goats to someone's facility, you can't have any pregnant goats, and you can't bring any goats that have been impregnated in another state into Washington. Now, how you actually validate and check that, I'm not really sure, And I did know that your ordinary policy for liability is going to exclude certain things, so I kind of flipped it around and said, well, you got to show me where this coverage, that we're not going to, that we have coverage if there's anything left over once your goats have left, and if your goats get out, or if they're not handled properly and whatnot. But it turned out that Washington State Department of Transportation uses them quite a bit, and they actually did a quite good job. But what I wanted to kind of point out, too, is acquisitions. I throw that in, not necessarily merging, but they bring up new challenges. And Dave, this is Smith Cove Arena, which is right next to, well, that's a different angle than, okay. That's right next to Fisherman's Terminal. So Fisherman's Terminal is the oldest facility that we have. Port formed in 1911, and over in Ballard, Fisherman's Terminal, which Dave mentioned was the home to the Pacific Northwest Fishing Fleet, still there. This was a slice, a privately held marina that had been operated for a long time by a family, and our former CEO thought it'd be a good acquisition, so we kind of went and did not do the proper due diligence first. We jumped in to buy it, and we knew there was going to be some issues with it. And if you look at it, it's not a large plot of land, so how much revenue can you really generate in that small area? And when you buy something like that, I mean, you have your current mortgage customers, including liveaboards, and liveaboard is basically, somebody who has a houseboat, and that's where they live in, and it's a residence. And also, covered boathouses are a nightmare in terms of fighting fire. That's another strike. And there's a lot of, we knew that there was underground contamination from fuel, from underground fuel storage tanks and whatnot. So Dave, there's a lot of money we're going to be pouring into that, I think. And then, competition can be a risk. Dave covered this when he was talking about how the Port of Seattle and Port of Tacoma decided to quit underestimating or cutting costs to get tenants or operators to operate our terminals, because it was that competition was creating a revenue stream that was well below what is needed to pay back all the investment in infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into these big projects, and once they're built, I mean, you can't simply take them down and move them. And so that was a risk that was recognized, and the solution of developing a port development authority came about. And I worked with the risk manager of Port of Tacoma on some of the chartering documents and how we were going to handle indemnification, and what if we find out things that happen once we form this, employees. And one of the things that we did decide, and I think this was a really smart move, so the underlying asset, the actual property, is retained with the actual original home port. So Port of Seattle kept all its property in its name, and likewise so did the Port of Tacoma. And the Northwest Seaport Line is really an agent working on our behalf on managing the operations and figuring out what tenants get what. With the indemnification, the first indemnification for things that happen are between the operator and the Northwest Seaport Alliance. And then if it goes beyond that, we're kind of in the background as an additional insured on a lot of their policies. But right now we're faced with kind of a new one for me. It's a claim from a lot of employees that worked for Tacoma and Seattle became Northwest Seaport Alliance employees. And in that transition of benefits and how it got extended and what was promised, and we ended up with some litigation that we're working through right now, which is interesting. In a commercial general liability policy, you have usually some employee benefits coverage, which is not the same as fiduciary coverage, which we have on our deferred benefit plans. So that's been a challenge, and I think overall, though, we did a pretty good job in putting together the Northwest Seaport Alliance. I think you showed this picture, Dave. So what does risk management involve? I mean, understanding our priority risks and then mitigating them, if it's practical to do so, to reduce risk likelihood or impact. And I guess my message with that is that, managing risk, you can't manage everything. You got to make priorities. But how do you arrive at your priorities? And does it really make sense to mitigate them? Like earthquake risk, In 2001, the Northwest and the Seattle area had the Nisqually earthquake, which we ended up with about $22 million worth of damage. We had about, through Factory Mutual at the time, we had $10 million through them and then $5 million through Great American Insurance. So we still had a gap of about $7 million that we worked through FEMA for. But FEMA is not like private insurance in that FEMA is on a payback. They pay you back for what is approved for you to spend, and it certainly doesn't cover business interruption. And unlike private insurance, which can be adjusted fairly quickly compared to FEMA. But when we got through with that, we haven't bought any more with earthquake coverage. And if you think about, we got $6 billion worth of assets, $50 million worth of earthquake coverage is going to cost you, is double what we're paying right now for property insurance. And at the end of the year, if you don't have an earthquake, you don't get that money back. And a lot of these earthquake policies will have location deductibles. So you got to take 10% of the location value. That's going to be your deductible. So Terminal 18 or Terminal 5, we've got, let's say, $750 million worth of total property. So 10% of that, that's a deductible of $75 million, which that doesn't make sense either. So that's a risk that we've decided to retain. And we have a means that to fund through operating reserves, operating and maintenance reserves we keep, plus short-term financial paper, liquid paper, stuff that can be easily converted into cash we can use. And we actually can still use FEMA because we reserve the right through a waiver with FEMA because we told them we're not going to buy insurance. And we listed all these reasons out, and they agreed to it. So that's another backstop. What does it take to manage risk? Framework allows us to strategically manage risk if they can be managed to meet our responsibilities to ourselves and our stakeholders. Very important. And then the other important is, but you have to take risk, otherwise there's no growth. The port has to take risk, as without risk, there's not really growth, innovation, and longevity that has been consistent since the port's inception in 1911. So you can't cover everything, and you have to kind of decide what's going to be important. And I always like to use a 5-year strategic look forward, as I think 5 years is a good time. Which I kind of sometimes chuckle with a century agenda, because are you going to be around in a century to see if we did our jobs right, Dave? So, but there's a lot of good things in there. That right there, actually, you can see is the new bridge that was built to handle arriving international passengers. If you've ever arrived from another country, the current process before this is your south facility, you got to put your bag on the conveyor, you have to then take the shuttle back over to an old facility, go through immigration, get your bag, all that stuff. This is much quicker this way, although it is a long, long walk. I think it's a couple thousand steps from the far end of the south terminal to get all the way through that and out. So, but it's a unique structure. It was actually built on site, and then when it was done, it's a big truss assembly. It was actually on this huge carriers. They took it down one of the runways in the middle of the night to get it down where they could actually mount it, and that incredible engineering effort on that. Which is one of the coolest things at the port. You work on these projects that a lot of it just wouldn't be out there. And I always kind of chuckle a little bit about risk manager, and they call the risk manager, I'm supposed to manage everything, constantly be available 24/7. It's really a responsibility that's shared amongst every department, every deploy. Everybody has to take ownership of what they're doing, and that in itself is risk management. And I kind of look at us as we help get certain things done. We like to look at things on a kind of an enterprise-wide level to to see if we don't want to put too much in one area and ignore this area. And it's sometimes funny when, talk to prospective, I don't know, it could be a vendor, a broker, and they're so focused on this. And I said, well, I hate to tell you, it's not a priority in the next couple of years. Maybe it will be, but right now, it may be a priority to you, but to our organization, it's not. And then are you resilient? And I like to use that word, ability to sustain an unplanned circumstance, learning from it, rebuilding, regrouping, and moving forward again. I think it's really important. And that really speaks to the whole organization. And we need new hires. Is that right, Dave? So this was something we had to do. It's a SWOT analysis. I'm sure everybody's done a SWOT. And this was an exercise in which each department, last year when we did our budget, had to identify things. What are the strengths and weaknesses of our department? What are the opportunities and threats? And one of the weaknesses was our new staff will have to learn our culture, learning curve, backlog of work will force some customers to be dissatisfied with their current output, workloads, and a lot of companies face that. I mean, during the pandemic, we were down a lot in terms of staff. We had to do with what we did, but also on the strengths, though, we got a lot of credibility, and we got motivated people who want to be there, and that's really a strength and an opportunity. It's really encouraging team members to share ideas. I got people that are working for me and got some great ideas on how to change and make things quicker, all for the benefit of the outcome, and aligning the priorities of departments with customers and revamping our metrics. You know, you always have to look at your metrics and make sure you're not reporting on something from the 60s or 70s that nobody cares about. And collaboration, really important, and none of us really really have a collaboration focus. But you do have to be a little bit, if you can't collaborate everything to death, at some point a decision has to be made, and that's kind of really the trick. But as managers, directors, we get a lot of freedom to kind of do things. I mean, we have policies and procedures, but there is flexibility to work around them. I'm going to jump to, because I know I'm running out of time here, so what about when unexpected things happen? So on September 6th, got a phone call in the afternoon saying, and this is our second Ford 550 utility truck that we had have an accident. And is like, thank God we didn't, there's no injuries. We did have both our driver and there was another vehicle that we hit a door on that had to go for medical treatment. But this is still under investigation because this really touches everything. I mean, we've got our own driver, employees at stake. We got third party property to the city. We got damage to the vehicle. We got damage to our truck. I mean, you add all the property damage up and you're looking at already probably, $45,000. That's a huge 450 truck. And we really got to look at a lot of things. Is it even the right vehicle? I mean, do we really need that big of a truck? Why did the driver lose control of it? And we get notification, and that triggers a whole sequence. This was the email here. And then on the accountability, right there, Dave Soike, he signed off on this in 2017. This is, again, the policy that I kind of put together when I started, and it's really grown over the years. And it's really more, we don't teach how to drive safely, but we do kind of expect accountability and honesty. And one of the things, and like when we were trying to fill this position on the driver program, fleet safety manager, we were trying to say, when accidents happen, what is that you focus on? And we focus on what caused it. It's less about the damage. It's important, and we know that we got to deal with the damage, but the damage or the outcome isn't going to really going to change or prevent something happening again if you're not going to the root cause to eliminate what caused the accident. So we really focus when we sit down and talk to these the drivers, and what happened? Was it the vehicle? Was it the facility? Was it the lighting? Was it the signage? Was there construction? We do get into how much training and oversight. I was just talking to a guy last week who on a piece of equipment. As an operator, a big excavator, was pouring in depth fluid into the wrong fluid reservoir, which basically ruined the engine, and we're looking at about $40,000 on this piece of machinery to fix it, to flush it out and get it going. That's big. But so we sat down and talked to him. I said, well, were you given instruction on this specific equipment? Were you given instruction on what to do if you get a warning light? There's some breakdown in communication there, so you can't really blame the operator if they weren't given instructions. I mean, it's just like if you're, driven a car for the first or second time and nobody explained you anything on it. So, I think we have accountability, and it's not just the employee, but it's everybody on up the staff. So I know I'm out of time here. It's 6 o'clock. So I'm not going to get into I had another example here that happened last week of a water damage sprinkler leak. A contractor was on a scissor lift, and as completing their work, they had a spotter, but the spotter couldn't, he was trying to communicate, but the person that's operating the scissor lift at the roof level couldn't hear him. So what happens is the guy in the scissor lift is coming down, whacks off a sprinkler line, which starts releasing water. Our alarm panel was not, the signal was received as a supervisory, not an alarm, so the fire department didn't roll their truck, and that thing ran for about 25 minutes, and a lot of water damage there. So that's going back to the contractor, but it's another one of those things that can happen. The compliance is a big issue. We have our own statutes enabling legislation on what constitutes a port district and what our powers and authorities are under the revised Code of Washington. Port districts in Washington, how many did you say there are, 79? 74. 74. Enterprise risk management, there's some good links in here. Won't get into it, don't have time. But Dave, I think this one I kind of turn it back to you, right? You've got the cash prizes to hand out?
Yes.
I think
From your wallet.
which is not thinking.
Do you want to get an internship? Do you want to build your resume? The variety of work that we do and the benefits of working for us are many and great. This is an internship class from before the pandemic. There's probably a dozen port leaders in there, including myself, and all the rest are high school, college, and graduate interns. We hire a bunch every year. We probably take the most of any agency in the Seattle metropolitan area. Imagine having fun learning what the job environment's like with a diverse group of people like this. You don't know where your career is going to go. You'll get through school and you'll think, I'm going to do that. And your career will take a path a little bit different than you know. The neat thing about where Jeff and I work is the number of business positions is vast because we deal with so many different businesses and so many different things. He just gave you a skimming today of risk, and it's all about balancing that and many other things. Look at the variety of departments there. How to connect with us? It's right there. And if I go back 2 slides, this woman, her entire job is youth employment and keeping internships interesting and alive. Even during the pandemic, she did everything virtually, and they kept going. Something our company cares about. I just want to say thank you, go Cougs. We'll answer any question, and if I don't answer it fully, it's because I can't, but I'll tell you if I can. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening to us tonight about where we want to work. We're hiring. We'd love to have you join our team. Okay, over to Mike. Okay.
Okay, we have some microphones set up, so if any students would like to ask a question, please. Anyone? We have a microphone set up right there. We have another one right there behind this first set of seats. I saw a hand go up to ask a question. Yeah, please. Yeah, I want to make sure, the questions are heard, so.
Or Dave's going to start picking people too, right?
If there are other students you might wish to be at a microphone or be behind our first questioner here, so we'll take a couple questions. We have a few minutes here. So is it Edwin? Yes. Very good. Yeah, one of my Finance 350 students. I think it's on, yes?
What are your thoughts faced by the Port of Seattle surrounding removal of the Snake River dams, or the conversation surrounding the removal of Snake River dams?
Wow. Snake River dams. You've probably seen and heard me say that we're creating as much salmon habitat as possible. Snake River dams, we are a county organization, and so maybe I need to separate myself a little bit from Jeff's microphone. We're a county organization, not a state. So I know that our governor for the state, and I know that our federal delegation, Senator Murray, is in favor of that. We haven't established a position about that yet. It's not really our realm. We're trying to do all the environmental work we can do in our zone. I don't know any more about it other than that.
Dave, I would add that, over the years, we've worked very closely with a lot of the Native American and the tribes that are in and around the Puget Sound area with salmon habitat. They have certain fishing rights and waterway rights that, we work with them on. So, those types of things we're right on top of.
Yeah. Puyallups, Suquamish, Duwamish, all have fishing rights, and we allow them to put our nets out, their nets in our harbor. We will move ships around them so they can keep their custom and established fishing.
As a matter of fact, on that T5 modernization project, this year we hired a helicopter, and we had 1 or 2 staff members that would do daily flyovers because there was the mating season of the orcas or whatnot, and we had to shut down work if any of the if they were within a certain perimeter of where that work site was, and whoever got that job, that was really fun.
Okay, any other questions tonight?
Let me ask one. Hear a voice vote. You think it'd be cool to work for our outfit? Love to have you. Keep in touch. Thank you.
Okay. So before we adjourn tonight, I've been joined on stage by the immediate past president of our Risk Management and Insurance Advisory Board, Mr. Matt Williams. Matt? And we also have Mike Rask with us. Mike is with Aon, and he's the new president of our Risk Management and Insurance Advisory Board. And they have some gifts to present to our speakers. So please.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. I hope you really enjoyed tonight's experience. One of the things we're really proud at the Carson College of Business is providing events like this so you can learn a little bit more about what's going on around you and opportunities for you in your career advancement. So once again, just a big round of applause for our 2 speakers tonight. And Jeff, I've never heard somebody cover so much risk management in such a short period of time, so thank you very much. A lot of interesting stuff there. For someone who's been in the business a long time, I've learned a lot tonight as well. So, but with that, I would like to present you with a couple gifts. Jeff's going to get a plaque and a little Cougar shirt to go along with that. So
Nice.
Thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thanks.
How many of you have flown through SeaTac Airport? Almost everybody has either been to SeaTac or they have been down on the waterfront. I can't think of many other employers who have been here that have directly touched so many of the individuals in this room. It's a dynamic organization. It's amazing to see where they're going. The next 100 years will be phenomenal. And we are just deeply appreciative, especially this Walton series and the endowment of this Walton series every year, to have this, to bring in great speakers for you to hear. And also, there'll be some other great speakers tomorrow night at Industry Night. So we'll have a number of individuals from the risk management and insurance industry and the opportunity to hear about the careers, whether it is in insurance, in the claim side, the actuarial sciences, whether it's in brokerage and or in consulting. So hope we'll see some of you tomorrow night, and I have the great pleasure of giving Dave his plaque and shirt as well.
I also have it on good authority that there will be a gift from the Creamery headed your direction as well. So one last item of business before we go tonight. I wanted to thank the College of Business Office of Technology for their assistance with tonight's event. Also, Angie Center, who's the college event planner, was instrumental in setting up tonight's program. Sue McMurray, who handled all the publicity for this event. And then finally, someone who's not here with us tonight, for the last 5 months, my contact at the port has been Carlene Tudor-Lee. And Carlene has been very patient with me and prompt in responding to my emails. So anyway, what a great turnout. I'm so glad all of you could be here. There will be an icon, I believe, when you leave the room for your amplifier credits. We always hold off on making the amplifier credit available until the end of the event. So anyway, I believe when you leave that the amplifier icon will be available outside. So with that, we're adjourned. I hope to see all of you tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. How about one last round of applause for our speakers?